Ladies and gentlemen, if you perform a piece of music, you know that tempo is very important. It's a choice that belongs to the composer or to the performer. That's a debate. In the 19th century, however, composers thought that tempo was their choice and that performers had to follow that choice. Because, let's face it, changing tempo changes everything. We know that, right? And now you can say like, okay, compositions change. I do my own thing and there's nothing wrong with that. But what if you want to reconstruct what the composer had in mind? Well, then tempo is important. Do we know these tempi that composers actually cared about? Yes. That's why the metronome was invented. And so when we travel back in time to Beethoven, Chopin, Schumann and that interesting, phenomenal time, well, we have thousands of metronome marks that today actually are seen in only one direction. The single beat, as we call that approach, where just like the metronome as we use today, where the note value in the metronome represents the tick, is what musicology and most musicians adopt in their playing. But the question is that sustainable? Because let's face it, thousands of metronome marks become musically absurd and technically impossible. What we propose is the whole beat approach. We approach the metronome in a different way, like a pendulum is actually used.
4, 5, 6, 7.
So in this series, we're gonna check if that single beat approach, this modern approach, is actually sustainable or not. And in order to do that, we have to fact check. And today, as a first video, we are going to dive into the work of Sir John Eliot Gardiner, maybe one of the biggest proponents of this single beat approach, and we're going to check his 9th symphony. If we look at performances, it's not always so easy to metronomize or to check the tempo. There are several ways that we could do that. We could, of course, measure the beginning, the opening bars, the opening line, and see what tempo that is taken there. We could also, and that's the best approach, measure the average of a performance. But there is also one other thing. It's not enough to push your orchestra to its and beyond its limits and say, yeah, but we reached that metronome mark. If you sacrificed or compromised on what Beethoven in this case has written, well, then we have still a problem. We still have to look at the score and see where you had to make compromises. And it's this latter approach that I would like to take in this 9th symphony. I will give you a few fragments. The Bariton entrance of the fourth movement, the finale movement, will be there because that's the most striking example. Actually, when we were preparing, Alberto and he and I, the podcast series, the listening guide to Beethoven symphonies in whole beat, we checked also that Bariton solo, not actually prepared for what we were to hear. So I'm gonna share that with you later. But first we start with the first movement. So the first movement is Allegro Maestoso. There is an interesting quote from a certain Bernard Sherman, and I'm reading from screen. I hope you will forgive me. On the recording of Philipp Herweger, also one of the proponents of single beat, but also on Gardiner's performance, that, and I quote, Beethoven gave this movement, so the first movement, a strikingly fast metronome mark. Well, those things are, can I say that those things are like strikingly fast metronome mark? You will find those remarks, like you will find hundreds of those remarks, like people saying like, but I don't understand these metronome marks because they're too fast. What's happening with them? Well, what happened is we have to read them in a different way. Anyway, which seems to contradict the tempo words that modify his indication of allegro, fast, namely non troppo, not too much. Still quoting from Bernard Sherman, New York Times, if I'm not mistaken. And a poco maestoso, a little majestic. Performances that approach the metronome mark, and Mr. Herweger and Mr. Gardiner come closest, often lack even a little majesty of weight, which is true. But they come close. 82 is the opening tempo of Gardiner. That's not 88 what Beethoven gives. And you may say like, okay, but that's just a detail. No, it's not a detail. If you claim that 88 is a tempo, 82 is taken for reasons. For instance, at the beginning, everybody knows the beginning of the 9th symphony. You have their 30-second notes, ta-dum, ta-dum, and so on. Well, I will play for you a small fragment of the opening of Gardiner's performance, and you will see that we do not hear 30-second notes. We hear triplets in whole beat. So even slower than our version. Here it is. So if you pay attention, you can listen to it again. You hear these 30-second notes played as triplets, and then comes the 16th notes, and the 16th notes is an acceleration compared to the 30-second notes. Well, the reason why Gardiner does this in the opening sequence, it's not that the violin players, so the string players cannot play these notes very fast because they just have to touch the string. You don't hear them anymore. It doesn't make any sense because these notes would go at the speed of 1/12 of a second. Now that's not so much. And in this floor of noise you have, this like you don't hear that. So they decided at a certain point, this is not a decision you do. This is a decision you make based on something that doesn't work. And what happens in this case, you may say, okay, that's a detail, but the detail is such that Mr. Gardiner here is correcting Beethoven's score right at the beginning. Let's move on to the second fragment. So the second fragment comes from the same movement, the first movement, and I'm giving that. Gardiner is slowing down from already too slow, so 82 instead of 88 to 79, and you will hear that. That's also a very good spot to showcase what a slight deviation of tempo actually does. And of course, I didn't talk with Mr. Gardiner, but I can understand why he does that here, so slowing down even more. Because of the Maestoso. In this tempo of 88, there is not much left of the Maestoso. It's similar. I mean, what Sherman and the quote that I quoted actually wrote is true. You don't. Is that where is the Maestoso? It's like already very fast. But here, this fragment, and that's a minor detail. I really get that. But in this detail, in this fragment, that detail actually shows the compromise, slowing down the entire orchestra, the piece, in order to safeguard something of that Maestoso. Let's listen. So, and then we move on to the Scherzo, which is a really fast metronome mark, and actually Gardiner makes that. I mean, we can go there and zoom in on details. There are tons of details in that fragment, but there is also the transition to the trio, where Beethoven gives whole bar equals whole bar. And again, I'm quoting here that same Sherman. That's a fantastic review. He says, Beethoven segues into the second movement trio with the Italian instruction stringendo. So what that actually means, you speed up. If you have a 3/4 bar and you go to a 4/4 bar and you want to keep the bar equals the bar, then you have to speed up like, what is it, 25%. So therefore there are a few measures where Beethoven says stringendo, so speed up in order to prepare for that trio. Which means, I'm quoting again, that the tempo should accelerate, but then he gives the trio the same metronome mark as the preceding Scherzo, bar equals bar. Several solutions have been offered to explain. See again, several solutions have been offered to explain the contradiction. There is no contradiction. by the way. And Mr. Herrewegen and Gardner adhere to a particular unconvincing one. They maintain the speed not of the bar, but of the quarter note. Both conductors manage perhaps 340 quarter notes per minute, which is about the fastest tempo human players can actually achieve here. The results sound silly. So what does Gardiner do? He, instead of going to a tempo in this transition, listen, the Scherzo in 3/4 is already at 116 dotted minim, at a tempo that is basically impossible, and there you have to add 25%. So again, what solution do we have? Gardiner plays the trio in a tempo not of whole note 116 but of whole note 80, which is a huge problem. It's not what Beethoven wanted. So let's listen to that. Now you can say, well, that's ridiculous already in this tempo. Or you can say, like, that's apparently what Beethoven... No, this tempo is not what Beethoven had in mind. Again, we play it even slower because we are at 116 half note there, actually. That's the whole beat interpretation. But it's already like the lines that these string players play, like... Remember, we're talking about quarter notes and eighth notes. So let's just speed it up to the tempo they claim actually is obviously what Beethoven wanted, which is 116 whole note. Again, some people may say like, yeah, but it's a choice. No, it's not a choice. Here we have a conductor that claims like we play just, don't think there is a metronome mark, we just do it. And then you go down like from 160 to 80. That's actually a big problem. And I'm not saying like, okay, there you made a mistake. No, I'm not canceling Gardiner, but I'm just saying like I should not be the one who is actually sharing these points with you. That should be in the booklets of his CD recordings, because that's how we move forward, like by making claims and then knowing that there are problems, because Gardiner is one of the smartest conductors that I know. He knows this. And he must have been thinking like, okay, but there is again a problem that I need to fix. There is again a problem that I need to solve. Here we have to go slower. The first movement, 88 to 82, the trio from 116 to 80, those are major decisions, certainly in the field of the historically informed performance practice, where actually we are supposed as musicians to just share that with our audiences, to say like, yeah, don't pretend you know everything. Don't pretend to have figured out everything, because what happens then is when something is really problematic, the general audience will not know. And when some newcomers like us present another solution, then you face a lot of resistance because of like not sharing these elements. So we move forward to the Adagio. Oftentimes people say like, yeah, but in the slow movements there will be a problem because like singers cannot sustain their notes, or string players, whatever. Well, here it's again a showcase that many slow movements in single beat performances, supposedly single beat performances, are played slower. Here we hear not 60 quarter note, but 52. So in whole beat, this movement lasts 19 minutes 32 seconds. In Gardiner's version, 12 minutes 10 seconds. Well, that's not a ratio of 1 to 2. Just a fragment that is actually going to in a tempo that is almost 40% slower compared to single beat. And then we come to the finale movement, the Ode to Joy, you know. The beginning of that, we have two metronome marks. Gardiner sticks to 66, which we also do in our recording. There's also a claim by Mr. Noten recently made that 96 would be the correct tempo. It's not without its foundation. I'm not saying that. But I think Gardiner uses 66 because his performance is 62. So a little bit slower. And I'm stressing that point because it's already really fast. Let's just share that. Okay, so you are slower than 66, right? But then comes the introduction. What later will become the Bariton solo is introduced here by the cellos. And Beethoven writes here, according to the character of a recitative, is that how you pronounce it in English? Whatever, but in tempo. We can discuss what he meant by, like, you have to play it like a recitativo, but you cannot discuss like in tempo. This is a direct input from the composer. Listen, guys, it's presto. You just continue in tempo and see what Gardiner does. This was the fragment where Alberto and I were like sitting and we were speechless. So Gardiner goes here below, in his opinion, half tempo. He is slower here than we are in our performance. And that's a major issue, I think. You can ask yourself, why does he do that? I think the answer lies in the Bariton solo. So it's exactly the same fragment. So Beethoven introduces, if you don't know the 9th symphony very well, all the fragments of the previous movements in the beginning of the fourth movement, the finale. But he also introduces all the fragments, most of the fragments that will be taken later by the singers. So here we have an exact copy of the beginning, but now not by the cellos, but by the Bariton. And to just give you an example, like our performance in whole beat is actually a little bit faster. Let's listen to that. I have a small fragment here. So again, we are not trying to say that guy is wrong and he's right and whatever. We take some like today's musical perspective of a single beat metronome approach and we just highlight some of the problems. You can still say like these are details, but the only reason why Mr. Gardiner decided to go slower than whole beat here in a place where Beethoven explicitly writes a tempo is because of the singer. Like, he still needs to breathe, he still needs to pronounce words. It's very, in a way, funny that oftentimes when people comment on a whole beat approach, like you will oftentimes hear like, yeah, but string players will not be able to play and singers will suffocate. Well, I will have a fragment that I will play later, but first I would like to show you what it means to have this fragment in single beat. And the quality is so bad because I had to sped it up like over 50%, 55%. It shows you one thing. This Bariton solo is so known. Everybody plays it and sings it in this tempo, in this whole beat, or even slower than whole beat. We all do that for generations like that. So it's like ingrained, do we say that, in our DNA almost. But here is the same fragment where I've sped it up to the claimed single beat tempo. There we go. So I let you to make a decision if this makes sense or not. And it's important because we're not used to hear this. The other parts of the movements, we are as a musical society, we got used to this very fast performance practice, and so we get used to the music, and it's because we know the music so well. We know what's coming. We don't have to process the entire performance real time. We can fill in the gaps because, let's face it, I'm not gonna touch upon that in this video. Our brain cannot process these numbers of it's too fast. But we know the music so well, so we can fill in the gaps. We can pre-echo the sound, so to say, or what's coming, because we know the composition so well. But oftentimes, as I said before, whole beat is criticized because of singers. Like singers supposedly are not able to breathe. The opposite is true. When we recorded the 9th symphony, the reaction of the singers was, finally, we can breathe. Because guess what? If you pronounce a word, you still have sometimes time to breathe and to just go on. What needs to be done in a very fast performance, and be aware that we are still a little bit under the single beat claimed tempo, is that the entire orchestra has to wait for the singers to breathe, because they don't have time to breathe in this tempo. It's just ongoing. And so this is a very telling fragment. Again, you can say it's a detail, but it's not a detail. It's again one of those problems where Beethoven made a mistake because he forgot that singers had to breathe. So the entire orchestra waits. It's a very small moment, but it just is there to give the singer, the baritone, the possibility to breathe. And I'm showing that to you because also this is something that during the rehearsals, there had to be a moment where the singer said, like, I'm sorry, I'm out of breath. And so a decision had to be made on a place where Beethoven didn't provide anything for the singer to breathe. The entire orchestra has to stop. That's a major decision. It shows that this approach actually causes a lot of problems. Let's share that. Just to close this section on the baritone, I have still one other fragment at the end. So Noortuin, who published in 2016 his thesis on Beethoven's tempo indications, claims that 96 is actually the tempo that is this presto. And I'm not going to give you the entire history. It's very interesting. I think 66 is correct. But just to use, and it's maybe not so fair, to use this recording by Gardiner to show you what 96 would mean. It's important that you know, because these claims are taken for granted. And also Noortuin in his thesis says, like, I'm not responsible for it. Basically, that's what he said at the beginning. Like, we're not going to test these tempi, right? For what reason? Not, I'm thinking that. So, but in 96, this sounds like this. And then just to close, one final fragment, Maestoso at the end, quarter note 60 given by Beethoven. Gardiner goes to 8th note 77. Well, that's just a tiny bit faster than whole beat. Here it is. So, just to conclude, you could say, again, these are all minor issues. We could easily solve them. There's a mistake maybe, or whatever. You can play this Maestoso, the last fragment, faster. But the right way to see, the right perspective is like, okay, these are all problems caused by a single beat approach. All these fragments, and I've just given you a few. We could dive into more and see like where dotted notes, 16th notes, triplets are just given too slow or whatever. All of them add up, and at the end we can say, okay, but at Scherzo we played at 116, yeah, but then you slow down in the trio till 80. You didn't play 88. You played 82 at the beginning of the... you didn't play 60 in the Adagio, but 52. You were actually 4 minutes too slow in the entire movement. That's a lot. So all these things add up. And so the pressure for, you could say the burden of proof is maybe more on the shoulders of the single beat people than, if I can say it like that, than on ours. Okay, guys. That was it for today. You're going to get more of these. If you want to hear, by the way, all the symphonies played in whole beat in the magnificent four-hands transcription by Czerny on one of the most beautiful fortepianos ever built. Can I say that? Yes, because I own the instrument. Then check out on our website, because I'm recording this video in January 24. They will be available around April, but there is already the possibility to for a pre-sale on our website. So check it out. We have also a great package, I think, the full Beethoven experience, where you not only get this podcast, 25 hours of us talking about this music, but tons of other things, cool things, I think. Check it out. And we also have a Patreon page to support the project that we are doing. It's very important. The Patreons are the backbone of this project, and we have an awesome community there. Check it out. Also, that link is in the description box. For now, thanks for watching. We see each other very soon again. Bye.